And we have heard about that, right? The disciples were sent forth. In fact, there are several passages about being sent forth. And there is something really magical about that. So you can imagine what it must have been like when the Lord was living. He gathered his 12 disciples in the one passage, and he told them, go forth. And he gave them some instructions about it. I'm sending you forth like sheep among wolves. That's a pretty startling thing, right? So I kind of wonder, okay, so we're the sheep? Or are we the wolves? What's going on here? That's always been a sort of an interesting paradoxical. And then following this, there's another message right there with it. Be it wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And that was the commissioning. That was the sending forth of the 12. There are other passages. There's one that is associated with the ascension. And I was noticing that that's the picture that the children had. That was also ascending forth. There was another one that you probably all remember. It's where sending by 2x2s. You remember that? There's even a song about that. So a lot of sending forth, and that's in the Gospels. But then we hear about this sending forth on June 19, 1770, when the Lord in the heavens, in the spiritual world, gathered the disciples together, the 12. And he sent them throughout the spiritual world the message that the Lord reigns, that his kingdom is forever. It was the message that came to the spiritual world, and it was the beginning of a new age. And we've known from various things that anything that happens here must be, it always will begin in the spiritual world. So that's where it all began. So that's the sending forth. We on earth at that time knew nothing about this. We know of this because the Lord told us this is what happened. And the date is there. June 19th, 1770. New Church Day, we call it. It is a day of celebration. We celebrate it because it was a brand new thing. And so a couple of hundred years later, more than a couple of hundred years later, well, folks, we kind of wonder, what happened, What's going on? It's not exactly like it is in the spiritual world. So it puts on us a responsibility because we too are called. We're all messengers. We are all those sent forth. And how we present ourselves to the world is what makes us Christian. The Christian message. But there's a lot more to this, right? Actually, the sending forth is related, we all know, to the Revelations, right? It's the story of that paradoxical, image-filled books, the Revelations. That was one of the last books. Actually, it was a long time before before it became the canon. It was the last book to be received. There was huge controversy in the early church about Revelations. Well, you can guess why. It is very, very troubling, right? Don't you think it's a little troubling when you read some of this? How many of you have read Revelation from beginning to end? Did anybody? Yeah. So if you've read some of that, do you get a little bit troubled by some of those images? So we aren't supposed to take those literally, right? We know that there is a hidden meaning in there. So how are we supposed to do this? How are we supposed to read this? There is this signs and wonders that they're talking about. The very beginning of Revelation itself is really an invitation into the spiritual world. Because these images were really not about physical things. They were about the spiritual realm, about the world of spirits, and what happens as churches decline. How do churches decline? Well, we had that reading. Because they cease to have in their hearts and minds, cease to live the teachings of Jesus Christ. They separate truth from goodness. And that is the decline in our hearts when we simply consider theology, when we read our Bible and stick to that and not realize that the truth is something living. It's organic. It grows in us. It grows in us because it is the holy in us. It's not static. It's changing. It's forever growing or declining, just exactly as plants do. When you tend to them, they thrive, if you know what you're doing. And then they can decline. So the churches, all churches have their glorious days, and then they decline. And then there is this new dispensation, this newness, this new birth. So the thing about Revelations and about the new church is there is just an incredible array of images. And if you go to those images in your mind and in your heart, they're wonderful. They're full of wonder. They're full of mystery. If you realize, that's the thing about, you could take any one image that comes to you as you're reading Revelation. You could just be there with that image. And what is that doing to you? What's happening to you when for example, the angel coming, the dragon? Most boys, mine certainly loved the story of the dragon, that was their thing. And the Lord coming on the white charger, what boy doesn't love that, with a sword? And, those images are powerful. And you know what? They're wonderful. They're wonderful. There is so much to be gained. But as you move along in Revelation, after the devastations and the apocalypse, how many of you love the apocalypse, the story of the horses, the 4 horses? I thought that was pretty cool. So then we get to an image that many of us love. And I don't say everybody does, but I certainly do. And that is the bride. The bride that comes down out of heaven, prepared for her bridegroom. And in all of Christianity, everybody kind of knows that the woman is the church. They kind of know that. So we're not the only ones that think that. So here's this incredible image of this beautiful bride prepared for her husband. Beautiful image. But, as we know, Revelation doesn't stop there. The images flow. It's continuous, panoramic. And then we see the woman in the back of your picture. I think this is my favorite. Clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet. And she is pregnant. The church, as we understand that woman to be, is pregnant. With what? With a new word. With a new understanding of how to be a Christian. A new understanding. And we know what happens, right? She labors, brings forth her child, and it is that child that the dragon wants to attack. So the images flow. But today is the day of celebration when we think about this wondrous thing that happened on June 19th in 1770. So a little bit of extra reading. This is actually True Christian Religion 791. And if you want these extra readings, they can be emailed to you. No problem. You don't have to have it, it's just there. This is 791 TCR. After their work was finished, the Lord called together the 12 disciples who followed him in the world. The next day he sent them all out to the entire spiritual world. It's amazing. To preach the gospel that the Lord Jesus Christ doth reign. And his kingdom will last for ages and ages. As foretold by Daniel and the book of Revelation, also that people who come to the wedding feast of the Lamb are blessed. This occurred June 19, 1770. Arcana Celestia, or Heavenly Secrets, number 253. It is by virtue of heavenly and angelic, own with a capital letter, that the church is called woman, and also wife, a bride, a virgin, and a daughter. She's called a woman in Revelation, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And the dragon persecuted the woman who brought forth the man-child. And in this passage, by a woman is meant the church. By the sun, love. By the moon, faith. By the stars as before, the truths of faith. Those truths of faith that light the way for us. In Apocalypse Revealed, number 533, again, talked about the woman in the sun, clothed with the sun. I want to add to this only one little passage. It's number 3. The reason why a church cannot subsist in the heavens unless there is a church on earth in communication with it is because heaven, where angels are, and the church, where men are, act as one. Like the internal and the external with man, and the internal with man cannot subsist with its state unless the external is connected. So here it is. That's basically the bottom line. We are only a church to the extent that we are connected to the heavenly church. It is glove-tailed with what we read in Angels in Action, that you all are reading in Sunday school. The church is really connected to the Lord. It is the Lord's bride, and it is men and women, children, all human beings taken together, only to the extent that one lives from the truth that we know, takes it right down into the external, into our everyday life. And so this day, celebrate in your heart the wonder of wonders that the Lord has done for us, for all humanity. And may we be receptacles and vessels through which the Lord acts. May we be messengers, like angels, to those around us, to our loved ones, and to all that we come in contact with. In that we are a church, in that sphere of acting from truth, doing good. In that we are a church connected to the one in the spiritual world. And so God is with us in all of that. It is His will. May His will be done in our lives.